Good afternoon, Baltimore and surrounding jurisdiction. My name is Ivan Bates. We have an amazing show today. As you sit down and see the guest that I have, I'm normally joined by Mr. Politics, Hassan Giordano. I believe he'll call in. And the boss of all boss, Mark McLaren. They believe he'll call in as well. So part of the staff is down in Annapolis, but I'm here with some absolutely amazing guests. I'll go ahead and start with ladies first. So you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Well, hello, everyone. Catalina Bird here. I don't have any exceptional titles or anything, just long-time person to do this.
Well, thank you for being here. Gentlemen, want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Brandon Soderberg. I'm a reporter here in Baltimore.
And I'm Ethan McLeod. I'm senior editor for Baltimore Fishbowl.
Well, I specifically didn't tell the listeners and viewers what this show is about. Yesterday, the state's attorney for Baltimore City said that they will no longer prosecute marijuana possession cases of any amount. And that's been met with a lot of support, and people are very happy. But it's also been met with a lot of optimism, and it's been met with a lot of anger as well. I wanted to bring a group of individuals, and we wanted to bring a group of individuals that were really versed on what's going on in the community, what's happening. Brandon and Ethan, you two gentlemen wrote an article that I really believe is probably part of the catalyst behind some of the thinking that Mrs. Mosby talked about in going from prosecuting marijuana to now all of a sudden deciding not to prosecute. So we'll talk about that article, what you did and your background. And you had just been out there in the trenches dealing, talking to people, really understanding how criminal convictions are impact us as a people and what's going on, correct?
That's one of the many hats I wear. Yes.
Well, yeah, you definitely out there, and so I think it's really my understanding is you have some very interesting analysis and insights into this, and we want to really talk to you to understand your feelings and being in the community and how do you really feel. And I personally am very excited about this in the sense that I ran on this where I don't like the prosecution of marijuana. However, I would have gone about things differently, and I'll have to go ahead and talk about how I see the legal fallout of this whole decision. But right now, we're going to go ahead and take a couple moments. We'll go ahead and pay some bills.
Good evening, family. Just letting everyone know that this DMV Daily broadcast is being brought to you by these fine sponsors, such as the stellar legal team known as Bates & Garcia Law Firm, specializing in criminal defense, real estate, bodily injury cases. Bates & Garcia is that Maryland's legal dream team. They get those W's, they get those wins. So make sure you contact them today for your free consultation at 410-814-4600. Again, the number is 410-814-4600. Tell them that the DMV Daily Radio Show referred you, and they're going to hook you up with the homeboy or homegirl discount. Also, you can visit them online at batesgarcia.com. Again, if you have any legal needs, I would definitely take an opportunity and give them a call. We've had many guests on this program that have actually testified to the fact that Bates & Garcia has gotten them out of troubles and jams. So definitely the place I'm going to call when I get pulled over by the police. So the show is also being brought to you by the savvy political strategists at Politicom Strategic Solutions, who have mastered the art of political communications and have successfully gotten folks elected since the 1970s. If you're looking to run for office in 2020, make sure you give them a call today to get your campaign set up with a user-friendly website, integrated social media, campaign plan, and much more. Their phone number is 240-242-7505. Again, their number is 240-242-7505. Now, they are offering now the homeboy, homegirl discount if you mention the DMV Daily Radio Show. So give them a call. Their rates were already affordable in getting your campaign started, but it's great to know that if you let them know that you heard it on the DMV Daily Radio Show that they will give you a additional discount for being a listener. You could also visit them online at politicomsolutions.com. And also, if you'd like to advertise your business, product, or service right here on the DMV Daily Radio Show and potentially reach thousands of customers around the globe, and unlike some of these local radio stations, we have the statistical data to show you that we are reaching thousands around the globe. So if you are looking to advertise your product, business, or service, I would definitely give us a call. Call 443-294-3900. Again, the phone number is 443-294-3900, and one of our sales reps will get back to you as soon as possible, and we'll tell you how affordable it is to advertise on the DMV Daily Radio Show. So now let's get this WTF Wednesday started, Ivan, and kick it back over to you.
Yes, thank you so much. I want to go ahead and start with you gentlemen. You two wrote a piece called Structural Racism in Cannabis. Black Baltimore still disproportionately arrested for weed after decriminalization. Tell us a little bit about that. I want to talk about your publication, the Baltimore Fishbowl, and didn't just talk about that, the information you got, how you put the piece together, and overall what the piece talked about.
So this idea came beginning of last year. Actually, the story was months in the making, if not a full year. Approaching a full year. It's a story that's been told in other major American cities about how cannabis is treated as a criminal justice issue. It's no secret, anecdotally, that African Americans are often disproportionately arrested for possessing a widely used drug, one that's now legal in a fifth of U.S. states. So we just had this simple thought, and what's interesting about this story can be easily replicated in many cities. If you go to Washington, D.C., the police will share this data, how many people they arrested, the ages, the races. Baltimore police can be a little more challenging with data transparency. Yeah. So this was actually, it's interesting because I have colleagues in other cities who've done a similar story. I think we took a different angle, and we tried to cover all angles, including the holes that police tried to poke in our data. So it was a series of MPIA requests we filed. We got the total list of charges from 2015 through 2017, the idea being that these were the first 3 full years post-decriminalization. In October 2014, a new Maryland law decriminalized possession of 10 grams or less of cannabis, making it a civil citation. We wanted to see how did that impact things moving forward. So we wanted 3 full years of data. What we found was that there were nearly 3,200 charges filed for misdemeanor cannabis possession, which that category is huge for the threshold of possession. And
that was filed in Baltimore City under the current state's attorney, Marylin Mosby.
Sure, yeah, by current city prosecutors. And the threshold for that is 10 grams to 50 pounds. So obviously you're talking a wide range here. Oftentimes as it approaches a much larger quantity, past maybe an ounce, I would say. I'm sure you're familiar with this as a criminal defense attorney. Yeah. People have baggies, other paraphernalia, scales, and that's a totally different charge.
Let me ask you, were there charges also including, like, if they found a gun or if they found cocaine or things like that?
No. So what we did, I'll get to that. I promise I'll be quick. But we had the zip codes. That was part of the data set that police sent. So we categorized it by zip codes, and then Brandon had a contact in New York, Andy Friedman, who is a talented data researcher. So Andy set out to map out where these charges were filed and concentrated across Baltimore City. What we found was when we talked to Councilman Scott, he's quoted in the story, few were surprised that these charges were concentrated east and west heavily. The black butterfly of Baltimore is no secret, and the charges mirrored that pattern. When we brought it to police, they said the point that you just brought up, that this isn't an accurate representation of how we are charging this crime, because oftentimes these charges come with more serious offenses like gun possession. So, you can take over.
No, you're handling this part.
So what we did from there, we were not satisfied with that answer. So what we did is we went to the FBI. It was interesting. I sent them an email, and it took 4 months for the police to get back to that MPIA request. which is obviously in violation of a very toothless law that says you have 30 days to get back if you're a public agency. But it took 4 months. When former police chief spokesman T.J. Smith told us that this isn't really reflective of the pattern you're suggesting because there's oftentimes more serious charges, we went to the FBI. They categorize this data with something called the hierarchy rule. They pluck out all the cases where there's a more serious offense. And so what you want is that high-quality data that filters out stuff where there was more serious offenses. What we found was, 3,200 charges. That's not enough, apparently, so we get it filtered out. There was still nearly 1,500, actually more than 1,500 counting juveniles, arrests specifically for marijuana possession during those 3 years. And what we did have from police was they broke it down just straight away. We didn't have to play with the zip codes and see the concentration of African American or white residents in each zip code to map it out. It just said arrestee is black, arrestee is white.
Yeah.
The numbers,
number 1 black male, number 2.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And it just came in a simple text file. It was ironically very pleasant to look at. Yeah. What we did with that is found a very staggering percentage, which is that it in total over those 3 years, 96% of arrestees were African American. Mm-hmm. And we then compared that with ACLU's pivotal research from 2013 that found, and there's been plenty of other statistics to back this up, very similar usage rates for cannabis among whites, blacks, Hispanics, and more so among whites and blacks. It's a basic instinct. You look at what the pattern is for usage versus what does the data suggest and show, how does it reflect the policing of possession of the drug. And that was the basis of our reporting. So then from there we talked to lots of people, including yourself.
Yeah.
About what this
means.
I
think when we sat down, we talked, I was very much for legalization of marijuana, stopping to prosecute the marijuana. Mm-hmm. And we saw that announcement yesterday by the state's attorney. Did you have the opportunity to interview the state's attorney's office for this article?
Well, we tried. Law enforcement was, again, not very cooperative with either of us, but we reached out to Mosby's office, I think, more than once.
Yeah, I sent them several requests, and what's funny is they were more cooperative and actually just responding, saying, we'll look at it.
Yeah, but then ultimately we were given no comment by the state's attorney's office, and then, a month after our piece comes out, Mosby yesterday put out this statement. So maybe we had something to do with it. I don't know. Well, but yeah.
I have actually heard that your article really had played a major role. That they were so embarrassed to sit down and understanding what the numbers in terms of the prosecution was really doing to the African American community that they needed to make a change. And for that, we definitely should compliment the current state's attorney that she was able to sit and see that, hey, you weren't in the forefront and you need to come aboard. And you guys had really put together an article that really showed that. So I really want to thank you for the work that you've done with this particular issue.
Thank you.
In our story, we did point to Larry Krasner in Philly, who took this. He's the DA there. And what we asked the state's attorney's office here is exactly the data they put out in their white paper yesterday. How many of the cases did you have over these 3 years? How many did you null pros?
Yeah.
The numbers, I was watching the presser. They actually used our numbers during the presser, but they didn't say where they came from. They did cite a lot of ACLU data and stuff, and frankly, it's not a vanity thing. It's not like, hey, that's mine, but you do want to be cited properly. When they put out the white paper, I saw footnote 12 right there with their own internal data. Baltimore Fishbowl's reporting also reflected this. So
okay.
But we asked for that data, and frankly, it would have been wonderful to say, by the way, SAO says 88% of these more than 1,000 cases have been all prossed, in this period of time. That's very telling about, the value of such a charge to prosecutors.
Yeah, and so I think without a doubt, the citizens of Baltimore City really owe you gratitude in the educational process of the state's attorney's office in terms of what is really going on with the prosecution. When you sit down and look at Larry Krasner and the work that he's done in Philadelphia, I think when you also sit down and look at the brother Bell up there in St. Louis and the work that he's been able to do, where he came in from day one, So I really want to sit down and touch bases to give the viewers an understanding of the background of where this decision came from on behalf of the state's attorney's office. Now, I want to sit and talk to you because you have an interesting viewpoint in terms of, from my understanding, I'm speaking with Hassan about this whole process. What are some of your feelings in reference to what you saw at the press conference and your feelings in reference to the cannabis prosecution and no longer, with the state's attorney's office saying we're not going to prosecute and the police department saying we're no longer going to make arrests?
Well, the police
continue to make arrests.
I was about to say, that's not what they said.
Continue to
so
make
first
arrests.
of all, to take nothing from my colleagues and my dear friend Brandon, I think giving their article full credit is a bit much when you look at who is her mentorship and her tutelage and have been behind her from the beginning. Former Mayor Kurt Schmoke tried to do this and was ahead of his time and was crucified in his party for it. And so to lay all of this decision making at the feet of a single article, however well written,
we
and well
would
researched.
100% agree that it's not our article.
I think
The article played a major role because this was something he was trying to get her to do for a while, and she refused to. Now they write an article, and a month later, it happens.
She had to run for re-election. And again, she's got really good advisors, and there's some things that you don't do in your first term if you were seeking a second or possibly a third.
Just like me and my colleague Baynard had asked Mosby in June during the election if she would consider doing this. She'd say she would. It took her from June to January to do it, but she had said before that she was interested in doing it. Yeah.
I mean, I'm imagining this is something that has been played out not just legislatively, but politically and career-wise inside of her inner circle, just by virtue of who introduced her to us in the beginning in 2014 and who stands steadily behind her. So I just want to backtrack on that a little bit. I think that it was inappropriate for outgoing Interim Commissioner Tuggle to make any statement at all. After the Fitzgerald mishap and rollout, and now Michael Harrison coming in, I don't think that his statement and adding the fuel to the fire between the state's attorney's office and BPD does any service to Mr. Harrison in building and establishing trust as he comes here from New Orleans. He could have deflected. He could have mentioned the fact that he has less than 5 days left on the job and opted to not say anything, and he didn't. Mike Miller has also recently come out against it. And the reality is that the lay citizen doesn't really understand the difference between decriminalization. I saw someone post whether or not she just legalized marijuana. And people that follow me know that I believe strongly in the fact that we need to teach civics in school again, because she doesn't have the authority in her elected capacity to legalize marijuana. But this lack of understanding of how all of these different agencies work together, who's empowered to do what, is one of the greatest disservices I think for our constituency, and the media plays a large role in that. And I was telling Ethan, who I just met with Brandon today, I actually appreciate the Fishbowl because they tell the truth and they don't sensationalize, and they're not putting half-witted headlines up for clickbait to go against the brew. They'll take whoever follows them and appreciate it, but they've stayed true to the true tenets of journalism, which I appreciate and applaud. The decriminalization was good. I'm hoping we're still on the next step. We got medical marijuana. We need to legalize it.
I agree.
And everybody that knows me knows and to some extent I have conservative values, and one of them is that the government shouldn't be policing people's vices. I think all drugs should be legal, just like alcohol and tobacco. What you do to yourself and the impact that has on your finances, your health, is not a role that I think that government should play. And so I like what she did. I don't care who gets to take credit for how it happened, but I hope that Annapolis follows in suit with states like Colorado and Washington, and we just go full legalization.
I agree.
So we can tax it, so we can lower some property taxes.
But let's look at how it was rolled out. Okay, if this was something you're really thinking about, your husband is in the legislature. The legislature really needs to change the law. Isn't this something that you try to build a consensus with, to sit down and roll it out, try to get the legislature? If the legislature says no, then you sit down and go on your own in that direction to say, hey, this is what we're going to do. And you also bring the police department in to say, hey, this is what I'm thinking.
I don't think that first of all, again, there's a very fractured relationship that you're fully aware of and we're a part of, between BPD and the state's attorney's office. So I don't think that that's a feasible strategy whatsoever.
The problem is, point blank, our criminal justice system is failing. And the reason, it's like a marriage. the criminal justice system is the state's attorney's office and the police department. If they are not on the same page, then it is going to be failure. It is absolute chaos. So my whole thing is, even if they don't agree, then you still sit down and you say, hey, this is what I'm planning, this is what I want to do, A, B, C, and D.
I want to follow your analogy, but I don't know if judicial discretion or prosecutorial discretion would be the side chick in your analogy or the legislature, but it's a little bit more than just BPD and the state's attorney's office.
No. In terms of the person, the police make the arrest and the prosecution prosecutes.
And the legislature makes the
laws, and I agree. That's why I say, do you first go to the legislature to say, hey, let's try to legalize this? And if they don't want to do that, I mean, do you then also have BPD where you have the statistics to say how will this affect that in terms of trying to legislature?
I don't think that strategically makes sense, and I'll tell you why. When her husband, who is now a delegate, was a city council person, immediately when she was elected was there this talk of collusion, the whiff of impropriety. Should the state's attorney be married to an elected official that impacts policy that her office will ultimately have to adjudicate? And so I don't think that you go to your husband, who everybody...
You go to the Black Caucus then. You go to the Black Caucus.
Yeah, like we had a reporter from the Advocate from New Orleans, and he said one of the things that made Superintendent Harrison so successful in New Orleans was the relationship that he had with the state's attorney's office. So there was a cooperation there, but we don't see that with this current state's attorney and the police commissioner, any police commissioner, for over the last 2 terms that she's been in there.
I would argue that it's not a lack of cooperation on her part. The media, the community, and a number of other people have helped to perpetuate this wedge that really started at the beginning of her first term that she was never able to get away from. And let's just be very clear. I wasn't a Marylin Mosby supporter. I supported Russell Nevadon in 2014. Marylin knows this. So I'm not here to carry water for it, and I'm not the strategist or in her kitchen cabinet. But I'm saying, as a person who does work in politics and from strategy and on policy, I don't think running your policy through your husband is a way to be autonomous in your job and be respected. Sexism is very prevalent in politics. People don't like to talk about it. You know, one of the issues many advocates are taking right now with Mike Miller's statements is that he referred to her as Miss Mosby and not Madam State's Attorney. Or, you know, she's not even a miss. She's married. She's Mrs. Mosby.
Right.
But you should respect her because you don't call the governor Larry. You know, and so there's all these other dynamics that one has to take into account when looking from the outside and judging. But
I'm talking about building a coalition.
Right.
My thing is, I understand you don't want to use your husband. I agree with you 100%. But what about other members of the Legislative Black Caucus? And you try to build a coalition. And the coalition I'm talking about actually doing something in terms of making sure we can legalize marijuana, because that's one of the things that when Ben Jealous was running for governor, he talked about legalizing marijuana. I probably assume that everybody up here and everybody in the room wants to legalize marijuana.
I want to legalize all drugs.
So do I.
You know, all drugs. And I understand. But I guess my thing is, if you go that route, here we're going solo. The police are not involved. We have a new interim commissioner who's going to be here in a week or two. Do you bring him into the discussion and the narrative to say, hey, this is something I'm thinking about doing? Was there another way to do this?
But he can still be in the discussion when he gets here, which is why, again, I don't think that Tuggle needed to say anything. But also, you know, especially for those listening who are in Baltimore City who don't know Annapolis, you're giving a lot of weight to the Legislative Black Caucus when in reality, when you cover session, that particular group and their backing is not necessarily a foregone conclusion that what you're advocating for is going to happen. There's some other coalitions and caucuses that wield way more power in Annapolis than the Legislative Black Caucus.
I didn't even see the Baltimore City delegation there. That's what I think was really missing out of that press conference. I respect those grassroots folks that were there.
I was about to say, people that was there.
Right. They've been at the battlefield for the longest, but you also should have had the Baltimore City delegation there, legislative delegation there. You should have also had the police commissioner there. Even if it was Tuggles, the interim police commissioner, you should have had at least a full body of folks that were on the same page. And I didn't see that at this press conference.
The people at the press conference represent organizations that work day in and day out with the people most impacted,
Of course.
by the fact that this hadn't happened and the way that it's been utilized to target people, and it's part of the reason that we're in a consent decree and violate people's constitutional and civil rights, right? So I don't have a problem with the optics of it. Center for Urban Families, if you know Joe Jones' history and what that organization does and how transformative it's been in lives, Nicole Hansen, like you said, Mundell, and Out for Justice, the people that were there were the people who aren't involved in politics. They're the people who are impacted by the lack of policy or when policy doesn't catch up to the times. So the optics of it don't bother me at all.
But when you talk about 48% of those are being affected in one community in the west side of Baltimore City, again, you should have everybody on board so that the legislation is going forward as far as making the changes so that people are not being despaired and unbiasedly being arrested in that community. The police commissioner should be there that's agreeing not to target that community in that way.
What's happening to black people in our communities are not the concerns of the consensus of the Democratic Party or the Baltimore caucus, the city delegation. It's really not. They went back to Annapolis to fight Larry Hogan on the Fight for 15 and go and back to what they want. And those are issues that are propelled by middle class and affluent white people who are the donors and the primary voters that keep them in power. And I've never seen anybody go to Annapolis with an agenda for what's happening to black people.
I have to disagree with you with that because the Democratic Party elected and voted for Ben Jealous, and Ben Jealous'
because Kevin Kamenetz died.
When, whatever reason, but his platform was to legalize marijuana. Because when you legalize marijuana to sit down and use the tax benefits to give Medicaid for everyone as well as pre-care, and so universal pre-K, and those are the things. There was already a movement. My whole thing is like, hey, you already have a movement. Attach yourself to this movement, and we can move the ball further for all of our people. But in doing it in this manner, now what it has done is caused confusion because the police, they're still saying, hey, we're going to make arrests
for the next 5 days until we get our actual leadership and get given our orders as rank and file, which is how commissioners work.
But Harrison has to follow the law and adhere to the law.
Follow the law as well.
Yeah.
Let's go back to when Kevin Davis was commissioner and for the brief time that Darrell D'Souza was. There was already an initiative with MBPD to minimize this going into it. And the same token, on the flip side of that, having ever used marijuana had been something that could keep you from being on the department. And they had begun to scale those things back so they could do more local recruiting. So let's not confuse Interim Commissioner Tuggle's statements with being the idea and the ideology that's been leading this department throughout her entire term.
I would say that under the data that we found, though, that like there's been no interest by Davis to reduce cannabis arrests.
It wasn't about well, he's been gone now for over a year.
What I'm saying, if he's 2015, 2016, 2017, arrests were not decreasing at all. That's certainly not.
And that's the issue. Policy comes from the top down. It takes a while when you change policy for it to get the rank and file, and so it was being alleviated to be able to be a greater recruitment tool. Whereas every officer in line with it, probably not.
This is what I will say. All day, every day since August, I'm in the courtroom. People are coming in. 60 to 70% of my cases involve the police smelling marijuana, searching a car, finding a gun, finding other drugs. There's always 60 to 70% of their cases. So the problem that I see now is, are you the police, and this is the confusion, are the police now, and let's say they decide we're not going to arrest you for weed, does that now mean that they're no longer going to use weed as a probable cause to stop the vehicle, to search the vehicle?
Not any officer I've talked to.
And see, that's the confusion. So now I'm hearing from, because my clients are calling me, they're like, oh, you know what, I got 50 pounds of weed in the back of my car, and I'm taking it from point A to point B. If the police stop me, because remember, there is no weight amount. If you have scales or baggies, that's the only indicia in terms of for distribution. So in your trunk, you could have 40, 50 pounds, you could have a pound, and then the police stop you. To the average citizen now, they're like, oh, okay, you're not going to do nothing. You can't prosecute. The problem that we run into, and this is on the legal side, you have the Fourth and the Fifth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment, you have, okay, we're not going to prosecute. The issue we have that now that the city's opened itself up on the Fifth Amendment, I would argue that if the police make an arrest because the executive body, meaning Madam State's Attorney Mosby, has said she's not going to prosecute, you could make an argument that the police are violating your right to due process, knowing that you're not going to be prosecuted, and now you have a legal lawsuit against Baltimore City. So the problem we've opened
lawsuits.
We've opened a Pandora's box that if the police now they're in a trick box, so to speak. If they decide that they're no longer going to make an arrest, then technically they're not going to be able to use the smell of marijuana for the probable cause.
I think the context of the narrative is all wrong, and that we have to empathize with it making it harder for police to do their job. There's no data that indicates marijuana usage is tied to violent crime. Like the smell of marijuana from people who were using and weren't distributing was being used, and it's evidence in the DOJ report. It's evidence of this in the CODIF report that I'm one of the co-authors of. We know that some, not all, officers used probable cause to do illegal searches and seizures. And to say that we shouldn't get on the right side of history of this because now officers can't use. There's so many other indicators of nefarious dealings that you don't need to be able to search someone because they smell like weed to fully investigate violent crime.
What I would say is kind of related to your thing, how no one learns civics, kind of bridging this all together would be that, like, I agree. I don't think anyone's saying it's not a good thing, but I do agree that it's created some conflict. Like, one of the examples would be in November 2014, a guy got pulled over in Baltimore because his car smelled like weed. He said he knew it had been decriminalized. He had a joint. This is in our article. He said, "You're right, officer. I was smoking. Here's my blunt." And what did the officer do? He's like, "All right, you got a blunt. I can search your car. It doesn't matter if it's a gram or 10 grams. I can search your car." Found
that
a
was
gun.
Decriminalized at that point.
Yeah. So that ended up leading into the Court of Appeals, and ultimately the Court of Appeals agreed that if you have smell of weed, that won't go away.
That's the law.
And I think what I would say, what I would be concerned about, and even some of the people I spoke to that aren't nerding out on this stuff like we are, is their question was, what does this mean for me? I think it could potentially create some misinformation, which people think they can suddenly just like walk around with weed, and that's a problem.
But you know what? That means they don't read. And if it get a few
now you're really talking
smart
like libertarian
people,
now.
I mean, I saw posts, I saw memes, people like they can't wait to go blow some smoke in the officer's face.
I mean, but you'll still end up in central booking.
Right.
You'll still end up getting collared under
the Lord looks out for fools and children. The criminal justice system is not tasked with that.
That's a terrible take. We need to treat everybody equally and help misinform there.
My whole focus and my whole reasoning is like, look, we all agree that we want to get rid of the old era policies of the war on drugs. I think my argument and my issue is the way in which it was handled has caused more confusion. There already was strife between the police department and the state's attorney's office. This would have been an opportunity to unite and also a way to build consensus.
I think that's idealistic.
And you know what? If it is, it is. But at least you attempted and you tried. Because when I sit down and listen to what Ben Jealous was talking about, I saw people excited for that. I do feel that you do have a vehicle in Annapolis to focus on this. Now we're having the real narrative and the discussion. But in Maryland, as a lawyer, the law is the law. And the law in Maryland says the smell of marijuana is probable cause and they're going to search your vehicle. My concern is that as more people smoke, as more people have it, the police now will have more of a reason. And if you're a bad officer, it's just another reason to go in your car, to search, to do whatever they want. They don't like you. Oh, yep, here's a gun. We saw it, the Gun Trace Task Force. That's just my concern.
I don't share it.
I hear you. I do this every day for a living, and I'm letting you know what I'm seeing on a regular basis. If you look at Wayne Jenkins, many of his statement of facts was weed. There was no marijuana anywhere in the vehicle, but because they smell it. And the other thing that's unique is we have body cameras. Body cameras don't smell. So now the officer will say, hey, you know what, I saw on the carpet, it looked like a couple leaves of marijuana, and I could smell it. And now, you know, they're searching the vehicle and they're tearing your vehicle up. And my problem is the law is already confusing, and we're only with this, we're making it a little more confusing. If we would have just
I'll say this.
came
I've
toge-
tried
come
to
together.
work. I'm not tried. I have, long before the uprising, in building trust between community and police. I have very good friends who are police officers. I have very good friends who are activists who do not trust the police at all and wouldn't call them if their own life was in danger. I understand both sides of it. And so one of the things I find most interesting is how many law enforcement officers don't actually know the law. So
No, you're right about that.
Not only do we need to teach civics, but while we're sitting here going over policies for use of force and some other things as a result of the consent decree, perhaps they too need some civics and legislative updates. You think about it. The person that cuts
I
your
agree with
hair,
you on that.
the person that cuts your hair has to do more continuing education. Your realtor has to do more continuing education to maintain licensing than the actual training and things that go on inside of BPD. So as laws change each session, go into effect not on sine die, but in some cases October 1st and other parts of the year, they need to have primers on that, because another thing, you can't enforce what you don't understand.
I agree, and that's why I feel by having a unified group of individuals sitting down, taking the time, working, talking. I mean, you've already said the first few years of her administration, she couldn't do that. There was no major rush. There was more of a rush to expunge the records than there was to automatically, let's rush, push this down, do this in terms of no longer prosecuting. I want to get to the end goal, but I want to make sure we do it so it doesn't cause more confusion. Do we have a caller?
I want you to get to the end goal.
Yeah, we have Lisa Mills on the line. Lisa, you there?
Hello, Miss Mills, Lisa Mills.
She hung up.
Oh, okay.
She hung up. I'll try to get it back.
So one of the questions I have, in sitting down and doing your research analysis, Philadelphia, Larry Krasner, he did this. How was that received in Philadelphia, and do you know how it was implemented?
I'm actually less familiar with Philly. I'm more familiar with New York. The order came down. There's more synergy, in short. There's just more synergy, and it might not be the prosecutor's office or the DA up there. We have the state's attorney, they have the DA. It might come down from the mayor. I believe it was de Blasio. And I don't know if it's the optics of it. It's a bigger place. I don't know if in every city you'd have the interim police commissioner, no less, bucking at something that he wasn't privy to or was informed of maybe the morning that it was going to go in the New York Times, that this is going to take effect. We're not going to be doing this. I can't speculate as to what the messaging was there, but I do know that in other cities there's more synergy, and there might be an elected official directing. Who is it, Bratton, who heads the New York PD, and that order would come down, and they'd say, "Okay, yes, sir." And there's an interesting lapse in that going on here, and it's going to, as you said, have some interesting repercussions.
Yeah. One of the things, because being a defense attorney, I've had cases, and actually I have a case right now up in York, Pennsylvania, so I do cases everywhere. So one of the things, and just talking to defense attorneys up in Pennsylvania, they were able to say, hey, when Larry Krasner won, he was able to sit down, talk to the FOP, say, hey, this is what I plan to do, this is how I'm going to do it. And they sat down and talked about an amount. He wanted one amount, they want another amount, and they kind of agreed in many ways. This is what we're trying to do. I do recognize it's still used for a probable cause because that's the law, but let's try to move away to make it as the least restrictive ways to enforce this as possible. And that's, to me, is why you have to have, once again, the relationship with the police. I think Kurt Smoke, who you mentioned, he even had a comment that said you have to have the police on board because the police are the foot soldiers that are going to be out there enforcing this law, whether you decide to do it or whether you decide not to. We have another caller.
Yeah, Ivan Batch.
Caller, you there?
Yes, I'm right here. How you doing?
Hey, all right. How are you?
This is PFK Boom. How you doing this evening?
Hey, all right. And you? How you doing?
What's good, PFK?
How you doing? How you doing, Catalina? I was definitely looking at the show. Very good show, very good topics. And just wanted to collaborate on what Catalina was saying about a very important part about us not being able to implement something that we, don't have a lot of overstanding about. Just like what y'all doing right now. And how you doing, Brandon?
I'm good.
How you doing? Like, I know that CIPFK Boom can know all three of y'all up there, and the basic person that would want to try to implement something or maybe policies, they don't even know all four of y'all generally like I probably do. I've engaged with you, many times on this political forum. So again, if you don't, to help the people, you got to love the people. And it has many lanes. We have many different people. Baltimore is a very unique city, and where I come to speak on is that I notice how we always go out of our city, and we'll see something be very successful somewhere else, and we'll quick to bandwagon, not understanding the uniqueness of our city, that we have to work from within our city, ingrained in our city. And once it becomes a tree, then you can add on fruits from our labor. But as a city, we got to work with what we got to achieve where we got to go. You got Catalina, you got Brandon, you got people like Boom I've been here 44 years, but you would never have a person where I'm yet to be at a table to have any implementation or say about some of the real changes of our city. I'm always looking from outside the fence. Somebody want to come in the alley and talk to me, but when it comes down to the table of getting things real change and real soil change, we all tend to, again, look at the glory and the stories of other cities and not look at the story and the pain of our own. And the pain is in the chest of the people. And you got to get on the ground from South Baltimore, East Baltimore, Northeast Baltimore, if you're a mayor or a governor, or even if you're a police. So, again, civil duty, being a citizen, we as a city can get this done. It's more citizens than it is officials. So we all we got, we all we need. I thank y'all for this time.
All right. Thank you, my brother. Thank you, Boom.
Yes, sir. Y'all keep doing what y'all doing.
Appreciate you, bro.
All right, we have a caller on line 1.
Lisa, you there?
I'm here.
Hey, Lisa Mills, how are you?
Hello, I'm fine. I just wanted to say, unless we have the police department and the state's attorney on the same page, the way Marylin Mosby did this thing, it's just going to be more harm than good to all of us. It's just going to cause for more problems because Maryland's got people thinking that we won't prosecute you, but then the police saying, oh, but we're still going to lock you up. So it's not good. She should have just did it another way. Everybody has to be on the same page.
All right. Thank you. PK Boom said some very interesting things. We need to make sure and find a way to have everybody at the table. And with this type of decision made by Madam State's Attorney, I think this is the perfect opportunity to sit down and talk, because to me, when I talk to people in the city, most people want this to happen. So, we have the research, we have people that come from different backgrounds. This seems to me to just be something that we just need to sit down and figure out the best way so that everybody can have it. We have the educational process, and we also have the police who understand what's going on. What are some of your feelings and thoughts about that?
I think that, with all due respect, I think you're a delightful person. It shows that you spent more time in courtrooms than in politics. Because, again, this is a fairy tale that you speak of, where the FOP is going to sit down with the police commissioner and the state's attorney. Philly's an example where it happened, though. It happened in Philadelphia. But Baltimore is not Philadelphia, and that's what Boom's point was when he called. And it's true of how we run our agencies through different administrations and where we build our criteria to set our hopes and dreams and our goals for what it could look like. We look at places that are not Baltimore, that don't have the same segregation that was sold to us as integration, but you can tell is really not, right? We have been sold pipe dreams that we are something like the rest of America when we're not. In the entry to my brother's book, I wrote the introduction, and I said that we have been the pivotal place for both and the source of the nation's greatest, the brightest, and dimmest moments. When you look at our history, and racially, especially as it applies to policing, we are unique to a city like none other in the country. And so, part of being feasible in strategy is taking what you have, like Boom said, and starting from there to make your plan. These are not relationships that have ever existed. To say it happened in Philly does not say how it can happen here. The reality of the situation is that we have to work within the silos that we have and tell that utopia that you speak of, that you want so much, comes to fruition.
There is no utopia to me.
But we can't keep allowing the narrative to be out of context to further drive the wedge as people in media. And I'm always very, very, hard on media while owning it myself. The context around this and the way that it's being performed is something that is making police officers' jobs harder. And linking marijuana to violent crime and the inability to fight violent crime, and all of those things are incorrect.
But in some ways they are, and in some they aren't. One of the things that I look at it like this: they sit down and they have charts to sit down and show. When I was in homicide, a third of the murders in Baltimore City were connected to the marijuana trade. Now that's going to allow the police, to say, "Oh, they're connected to violent crime." And one of the issues that I also have is in marijuana. When you sit down and get your CDS analysis now with the marijuana, I'm sitting down and seeing fentanyl is laced with the marijuana. And we know it's fentanyl. And you're right.
It's in the dope.
But it is in the dope. But, I think part of the problem that we have is that you have two groups that have to work together that are talking at each other. At the end of the day, my whole thing isn't a utopia, but my thing is about building consensus. Otherwise, if we don't build consensus, we're doing like Donald Trump with this wall. It's the wall. That's how it's going to be, and I'm going to do it my way. We have to find a way to build utopia.
That was a stretch.
No, I mean, you've got to find a way. You've got to find a way, but you've got to find a way to build consensus.
But the operative word that you skipped over that you used yourself was marijuana trade. The drug business is not the same as the drug user. So again, if we allow the context of the narrative to be that anything involving marijuana can automatically be considered an indicator of violent crime, is false.
But I think their standpoint is, because it's not regulated, you're going to have the individuals selling marijuana. And then because of the money that's going to be in marijuana, it's not regulated. I think that's where they're coming from. And there are some things that make sense. There are some things that don't. Also, we don't have a weight amount. And because you don't have a weight amount, then you can have 50 pounds, 70 pounds, 100 pounds. And your argument is, hey, you know what? This is for personal usage.
I have 18 sacks in my car and say I'm a user.
I just want to know who his clients are that call him up on the phone when we know they listening to everything, talking about they got 50 pounds in their trunk. Like, who is you representing?
Well, you know what?
And do they know how phones work?
I didn't say call me on the phone.
That is exactly what you said.
They come in and sit and talk. And so, look, my whole thing is we all want this. What's going to work and what's going to work uniquely with Baltimore? We have a caller on line two?
You have two calls.
Okay.
Two calls. Line one first. Caller there?
Hello, caller.
Caller.
Hey, hi, Ivan. It's Richard.
Hey,
Catalina, I had one question. While I applaud the decision by Marylin Mosby to do it, I think the big and sort of missing question is, why didn't she do it sooner? You gave an answer for the purpose of reelectability, but wouldn't you think that, decriminalizing marijuana, or at least not prosecuting marijuana within Baltimore City, would be probably the most popular thing you could do as a state's attorney?
No, not really. So she...
Ooh, I'm listening.
I don't believe that. I feel like that she got met with a challenge that no state's attorney in this modern era had to face. And what happened with Freddie Gray at the beginning of her term, it created a divide in the city, especially among what would be seen ideally as her core base, which is the base for most of the Democratic Party, which is black women. You had black activists and black community members that supported her, community members that were against her. It went beyond Freddie Gray, and some other arrests. I know Kelly's watching, so there's Keith Davis. So there was a divide already that this wasn't going to be something that would be anything more than something that she would be used to be attacked by if she was primary. I think that the decision to do it was a pragmatic one, and that it's so soon after re-election that it's, and they've already gone on record and said they asked her in June, and she said she would think about it, and the people who were behind her. It's a different kind of strategy in how you roll certain things out. But the base was divided, and reelectability was not certain at that time. So no, I don't think that it would have helped her. I think that this was the time, and it made sense when she for all intents and purposes, secured her bag.
And I have to 1,000 trillion% disagree. And the reason I say that, I had cases with her as a prosecutor. I had a case with a brother named Jamal Williams and 4 brothers standing in a group that one of them drops a joint. The cops roll up on them, and when the police says, hey, which one of you is going to take the charge? They're quiet. All 4 of them come to court. Marylin Mosby is the prosecutor, and she tells me she wants 30 days in jail on every single one of them. I think knowing her and her prosecutorial tactics, myself and the other gentleman, Tharu Vignaraja, we were already saying legalize weed, no longer prosecute weed. It was a very, very popular position to have. I think what has happened is that we've now moved, we've shifted. My personal feeling is I think this is part of a bigger plan. But at the end of the day, I think it is the right way. I think it is the right decision in terms of no longer prosecuting the marijuana. Like I've said, my only issue is the way in which it was handled.
And as a lawyer,
Catalina,
go ahead, Richard. No, I was just going to argue with Ivan some more, but by all means, what would you say?
We're not arguing. We're just having a philosophical discussion.
I side with Ivan because what votes would she lose? I think that one argument you'd have a good case is if there could be a bigger gap between the state's attorney and the Baltimore Police Department. But I think we all know there's a really big gap there. So why not do it earlier? Because she could have
lost black votes to Ivan.
No,
I think that
she could have lost if
she wouldn't have lost because you would have agreed on this.
She should have done it the day of decriminalization.
No, he said what votes would she lose? And the votes that she could have lost were the ones that were why some people didn't get into the race. Russell Nevadon didn't run again. It was the idea, spread in part by fear of the divide of the black vote. So again, it makes perfect sense to me to not do it. She was heavily opposed. I'm sitting next to one of the opposition. We're acting like this is all about how we adjudicate and not how we win elections. And again, also looking at who her mentors and the people behind her have been. If you remember what happened to Kurt Schmoke after he tried to legalize it, he didn't have a political career after that.
But the difference is we have Larry Krasner.
It's
Larry Krasner showed us what to do.
Now.
Yeah, Larry Krasner had made the steps.
But Larry Krasner's not part of her kitchen cabinet, her mentorship, or how we got her in the first place, though, Ivan.
You know what? We can agree to disagree on that one.
Okay.
I think that I'll use a stoner word. It's a bummer that we have a state's attorney that has sort of moved this in a way that someone like me who reviews weed for a living, among other things I report on, is troubled by how this rolled out, and that I have to sit there and look at that way because we have a state's attorney who I also can't help but think of something like the Keith Davis case or clear knowledge of the gun trace task force before it happened, that we have a state's attorney that I can't get excited that she's taken this pretty strong and radical stance because I'm so distrustful of how she's rolled out a lot of other things. That's a bummer to me.
Brandon speaking.
Yeah, that was Brandon.
Well, I think a lot of people view that as not an election year stunt, but a long-term thing that she would want to be known for. And I think a lot of people think now that she's running for mayor. That's not saying that it's bad, but the optics of doing it now when there's absolutely no kind of threat whatsoever versus taking the risk earlier. I think that if she'd done it earlier, like at the time of decriminalization, nobody ever would have been able to beat her as state's attorney, period.
Yeah.
Because
nobody
I
beat
think
her anyway.
There's probably no issue in Baltimore City that's more popular than legalizing weed. At least from what I gather on the ground.
Yes.
I just don't see the loss in her doing it earlier.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of loss in the way she did it.
I don't think it's popular, though, to the senior and some of the super voters.
No.
Well, I think what it is, you give them the opportunity to sit down and see what's going to happen. When it was decriminalization, you had the time period and you had the political capital to sit down and do it in a way that made sense and they felt very comfortable with.
There's an entire generation that is never going to be for legalizing anything. They see all drugs as they think marijuana is the same as dope.
And they're dying every single
But they ain't all dead yet.
Those
and she needed their votes too.
Because she only got 49%.
My bad. Mark said that those voters are often moving up to heaven, and I agree. And I think that we could settle this easy with a public opinion poll across Baltimore City. How much earlier would you like weed have been legalized? And I think people would have said years and years and years ago.
Yeah,
although
yeah.
I'll take earlier this week.
And one of the things, I don't smoke weed, but I'm from a point where I'm like, look, it needs to be legalized because I see what it does to people's criminal history. As a defense attorney, we've been jumping up and down and screaming, why are you doing this to our clients? Because when you have a kid who's 18, 19, 20, and they have all of a sudden a weed conviction, and that's the only thing on their record, then they can't get a job. And, there are people who want to be police officers. They can't be police because they've smoked weed 4 or 5 times. That's crazy to me. And, one of the things that's also very interesting, when you talk about, we're going to go ahead and get rid of these 3,000 weed convictions. Well, the General Assembly has already said after 5 years, you can expunge all marijuana convictions. So this already on the books. The only thing we want to do now is say, okay, you said 5 years. Can we now get it immediately, effective immediately? That's a way that you work with the General Assembly to do that as well.
That would be something that I'd say it's not automatic. That's the one thing. It's this expungement process in California. It's infamous at this point. They said, as soon as we legalize, you can go get these cleared out. There's a huge, and most people in California is what they found, the reporters found, but the state has, the judicial system there is shared, is that people aren't bothering. It's not an instinct that occurs to somebody. Even they think it's a pipe dream even after it happens. So until somebody says, hey, it's automatic, there's going to be some kind of thing in the system that clears it.
And, I think what we've learned from that then is once you have the marijuana conviction that you can put in the computer that 30 days later it automatically will expunge on its own. I think there are ways to get around that, but I just feel like the legislation is there. This is something that the legislatures have already agreed on. We can now just make it instantaneously. We have another caller.
Anything else, Richard?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We have a man that can give us an opinion from a law enforcement perspective. Sergeant Boatwright, you there, sir?
Yes, sir.
Hey, how you doing, my brother?
How you doing? I'm just most of the
I'm
conversation after brother PK Boone came on, but I think that he was absolutely correct about having everybody at the table when decisions like that are made. Wanted to, start my quick comment, by saying, this is my personal opinion and not the opinion of any organization that I may represent. But I do feel strongly that we are setting up a generation of people in the city of Baltimore to become unemployable. In order to gain gainful employment in certain career jobs, you have to go through drug screening. We just don't want to set up our generation that's coming up to be in a situation where they can't, make a good living to sustain themselves. I think that I agree with you with Catalina when she says that she wants to legalize, all of the different drugs. And certainly in marijuana, if we're going to get there, we have to go through the process of getting there. And I agree with all of the statements that have been made. But we need to go through that process first.
And I'm all for process, Clyde. I don't disagree with you at all.
We could just get rid of drug screening and then we don't have to worry about this.
That's one way to do it. We could get rid of drug screening. We could get rid of a number of things. If you're not operating heavy machinery and endangering anyone else's life or your own, I don't even know why it's a necessity to work at a garden or in a grocery store and retail. There's a lot of different ways that we can come from it. But again, I just want to come back to the fact that if we continue to have this conversation with the narrative in this context, be it intentionally or unintentionally, we are tying marijuana usage and marijuana to violent crime in a way that makes it sound as if they are synonymous, and they are not. And those beliefs have been criminalized and weaponized against my community, and hence why we're in a consent decree, as I'm sure you will.
I want to push back just a little bit, and I blame, funnily, jokingly, I blame all this on Ivan. He shouldn't be as good of a defense attorney as he is, and we wouldn't be here. I remember being a young deputy in Judge Wade courtroom and watching Ivan try cases, and man, I would hate to go against this guy, and now the world gets to see that.
Thank you.
From being a police officer, from my experience, You can't smell a gun. You can't smell cocaine. You can't smell any drugs. You can't smell them. However, if I'm at a stoplight and that car goes by and I'm able to successfully, retrieve a gun in the car stop based off a marijuana stop, and in some cases we're able to close open cases by debriefing the person that's in custody that could be on parole.
No.
If we're able to close murders like that, then I think that's one tool that
How many murders have you closed on
weed?
weed charges? How many murders have you closed based on getting weed out of someone's car?
Well, I mean, I'm not a homicide detective, nor have I
the
ever
school
been, but
police.
I know who he is. I know who he is. Or how many have you heard anecdotally?
I have taken people to homicide, and they have been cases that have been closed based on that. So to suggest that it's not a useful tool is I think it's kind of wrong.
I mean, it would be a useful tool if we just stopped everybody all the time for anything, but we shouldn't. This is why weed should not be part of this. We should not. It's an absolute violation of the Fourth Amendment. You have a police officer on the phone admitting that they use it to violate Fourth Amendment. That's a huge problem.
Because you can't smell guns or cocaine doesn't mean that it's okay. No. I have a comment on my page where someone said, that they've had their black and milds being told that they smell like weed, and so under that ideology, they could be searched. Right. You can't have that much ambiguity and gray area in a moment that we're in like this, in this community, especially as it applies to black people, and not be responsible for the narrative and the context in which you disseminate this information.
So I'm with you on that. I support everything that you're saying on that. I'm just saying we have to get to that place. If it's going to be, legal, let it be legal. That's fine. But go through the process. And I just don't agree that the process that we're using to get there is just the right way to go. We could talk Fourth Amendment and all that other stuff in another conversation. I thought this was about how this was rolled out.
It was. I mean, one of the things we did talk about is legally the Court of Appeals, which is the law of the state of Maryland, has said that smell is probable cause. So when the car goes past, they have the smell. It's the probable cause. And one of the things that, I've been jumping up and down and say, look, you didn't find any weed, so how can we ever believe you ever had a smell? Let's just say that argument has helped me a number of times and my clients a number of times in Baltimore City.
But Ivan, I thought there was a case in Ohio, and I remember this correctly, that it actually was a case that dated back, I think, to like the 1950s, where there was a hotel where the gentlemen, they had smelled opioids being smoked in a hotel. And they ended up raiding a person's room in a hotel.
There's a case out of
and they found a bunch of guns in the hotel.
There's a case
in
Maryland
opioids.
It comes out of Ocean City where the police officers get a call. When they get a call, they go to the door, and before they knock on the door, they smell marijuana. And smelling marijuana, there was the probable cause at that moment in time because they hear people. They go in there because they say they have exigent circumstances to search. They then find the guns, but they find what they say is some burnt marijuana, and the court said that was correct. So you see how marijuana has played a role within the judicial system for so long as a tool.
But there's been cases in the past that have been shown that you can't justify a smell to use that.
There are so many different strains of marijuana.
Right.
What are they smelling?
Look, you know what?
You didn't even know.
And I even know some of these little, what they call the Jamaican beanies, the little cigarettes that smell just like weed.
I'm just telling you the law. Look, like I said, I don't smoke weed. I'm telling you the law. So, from my standpoint, I'm making the same arguments that you're talking about. I'm making it to the court or to the jury. And there are sympathetic ears that hear those arguments. And that's what I think. There's so much confusion here. So, but hey, Clyde, thank you so much for calling and everything. And participating. All right. Take care. I think we have another call.
All right. Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah, we have the bosses of all union bosses on the line. Mark, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Hey, how you doing, my brother?
Wellity. I've been on hold. I've been on hold for a while, and you can't. For some reason, the system is broken, so I can't hear what was being said while I was on hold. So the things I'm going to correct Catalina on are a little bit stale. So y'all will excuse me.
You sure you wasn't home smoking a joint?
Right. So a couple of different things. Number one, to suggest that anyone who is thinking that the state's attorney should have put together an Annapolis-based coalition
likening that to her getting her husband's permission or help is ridiculous. Nick Mosby isn't even on the Judiciary Committee. He's not an officer in the city.
I ain't say that. That's your people's over here.
City delegation.
That wasn't my idea. If you gonna call in to your own show to argue with me because you ain't here, you should argue with me about things I said. That was Ivan who wanted that.
No, I said you should.
I know Nick's not on Judiciary.
No, listen. What you said was she shouldn't have to. Basically, she shouldn't have to go to Annapolis to build a coalition like she has to ask her husband about something.
That's not what I said at all. So your next point?
It was.
No, that's not.
So that's irrelevant. That's irrelevant.
That's not what I said.
She wouldn't go to Nick anyway. That is exactly what you said.
That was my point, that she shouldn't have to and wouldn't. What's next? Because that's really all you called in for. Let's go.
No, that's not what I called in for because you were arguing.
I'm always ready, my dude. Let's go. You called in to say what next? You're holding up the call lines. There's other people that want to get in. Make it snappy.
You take as much
Make it snappy or be in studio.
You a host. Take your time.
Make it snappy or be in studio.
Now the next. Oh, thank God, this is her only time on here. So now the next thing is, since when is the Fight for 15 something that's from that's the white middle class agenda? Who do you know that would benefit from the Fight for 15 that's white middle class folks?
Dundalk.
Can you run that down for me?
White people. I think you answered your own question.
So that's what drives the Fight for 15, Catalina, is middle class.
The white people drive most of y'all Democratic agendas. I mean, and I'm real vocal about that. So, like, it's not slick to call and disagree with me on a position I've been very vocal about from the very beginning, and everyone knows. They put black faces like yours on air and in certain positions, and it's white folks that tell y'all what to do and run your whole agenda. Don't play these games with me.
You're ridiculous. Who came up with
the feeling's mutual?
Since you know.
You're the one that know everything. You sit in my Baltimore City Voters group all day and tell everybody what's news and what's not news. You the one that's in the know. I ain't even for the Fight for 15. So you tell me, you the insider. You the insider. I just do the work. So you answer your own question. You gonna call? You called in to ask me why I said that white people benefit, and then say who are the people? The answer is the white people.
Listen, Linda.
My name's Catalina, not Linda.
So authoritatively.
Please get it right. Catalina. Last name Byrd.
Your name doesn't matter.
But
it doesn't matter.
It really does. But okay.
The point I'm making is, since you are talking about the Fight for 15 being a creature of the white middle class, I want you to tell me what you know about the origins of the Fight for 15. Or were you, as usual, speaking out of the side of your neck?
First, I don't speak out of the side of my neck. It is an opinion that's shared by you, and that's wonderful.
Okay.
I don't lose any sleep over what you think of me. Next, I was asked to be on this show to share my opinions. I don't have to answer your questions, but I don't have to answer your questions. Name any Democratic agenda that don't have white people behind it. Tell me any Democratic agenda doesn't have white people behind it.
The Fight for 15. The Fight for 15.
You believe that's driven by black people?
All right.
Yes, it is. It certainly is.
I ain't talking about the foot soldier that y'all put out there for the optics. I'm talking about who gets to tell you when you get to introduce it and when you don't.
You don't know.
All right,
okay. You're right. The Democrats got secret black shot calls I ain't know about.
No. Come on, Kelly. This is what we're going to do. We're going to sit down. Mark, let me ask you this. What were your feelings in reference to the rollout of the no longer prosecuting the marijuana cases?
I think it's an incredible idea. I thought it was an incredible idea when you had it 2 years ago. But what I also think is that there were some missing pieces. I'm wondering what the rush was here, because there seems to be some missing pieces that needed to be in place to make this happen. One question I have is the amount of marijuana completely irrelevant? Like, if I get pulled over with a pound of weed, am I exempt from arrest? And if so, because if I don't have any other indicia of distribution, then I can have as much weed as I want. And if I can, then my question is, what does that say to the gangs in New York and Philly and everywhere else? Does that signal an open season on Baltimore? Maybe not, but I just don't know. I would like to know more about what we're trying to get at, I think, is to stop locking up black folks for smoking weed. I'm all 100% behind that. My only question is, what about, I heard some statistics somewhere that 31% of all homicides in Baltimore have to do with marijuana, and I'm wondering where, like, if there's gang activity that will be encouraged by there being no enforcement. Like, if you can't, I never thought I'd agree with Clyde Bofield on anything, but if you can't pull, if you have no nexus to lock up a really bad guy who you may not have it all on right away, how does that impact our criminal justice efforts in the city? That would be my question.
Okay. Based on the announcement that I heard yesterday that unless you have an addition of distribution such as a scale or baggies, then the amount does not matter.
Right.
So you're talking about a pound, you're talking about 20 pounds.
She said it had to be able to be articulated or...
That it was for distribution.
Right.
And so on. Number two, the thing that really concerns me is because it's not regulated, then you're going to have other groups enact, let's say the police said, look, we're not going to make any arrest for marijuana. So does that now mean it's open season to sit down and say, oh, you know what, me and my crew, we're going to sell weed because, we're not going to get arrested. We're good. And,
right.
That's one of the things I can definitely see happening. Look.
How do you sell weed without the necessary paraphernalia to distribute it?
Oh, easily. You
think they're going to stand outside and just break off pieces of bread and
so,
put it in
so
your hands?
I want to give this. I want to give this example.
I
want to give this example. So I'm an old street guy. I remember when there was a thing going around where folks used to go out and take crack rock, and instead of having it in baggies or in capsules, because you didn't want to get caught with baggies of capsules, we used to walk around with the crack rock already in a bag, and we would break off pieces and hand off pieces because that didn't look like distribution versus you're a
little bit older than me. The elevation of that was the vials went in a potato chip bag and stuck in the corner of a missing brick of
No,
a
but
house.
there was a time that
very little distribution going on with actual paraphernalia.
There was a time that we got away from the capsules because if you got caught with the capsules, they would count the capsules and they would charge you with a CDS based on the capsules. So we would walk around with the cellophane bag with basically the crack rock already in a little wafer, and we break off pieces and sell it off based on pieces. You can end up doing the same thing with marijuana. You have an ounce of weed in your pocket and you break off a little bit, and I'm not necessarily distributing because I don't have a scale or I don't have baggies. I mean, you could do the same thing.
You could, but
if you
tell
pull
you.
If you pull a guy over on 95 who has a pound of weed in his car but no plastic baggies or scales, you're telling me the police wave him on and say, keep going, enjoy your day, son?
I would point out here, I think police are still going to enforce what they believe to be the case. And think about the loss for that guy. He's probably still going to lose that pound of weed. That is, frankly, a huge loss for somebody trafficking in large amounts of
But if he goes to court and tells...
it's not illegal.
Then my question is, and this is the unique point of view. From my point of view, looking at the forfeiture laws... Because she's not prosecuting it, it's his property. He gets it back.
Right.
I mean, it's so when you sit down and look at it, the forfeiture laws, and the way they're written, especially in Maryland, are very interesting because it's his property. He's saying it's mine. And in Baltimore City, they're not prosecuting it. I guess you'd have to sit down because the state's attorney's office does the forfeitures as well. You'd have to sit down and say, okay, but it's illegal. But you're not prosecuting, therefore you're not, enforcing this aspect of the law. That's why I say it's confusing.
Right.
We just don't know.
And as far as a criminal defense standpoint, if you can articulate the fact, hey, I'm a user. I don't care there was 14 pounds in the back of my vehicle. There was no scale. There was no baggie. Right.
That's what you say. I smoke weed all day, every day.
Every day, right. I was just making sure I didn't have to come out for a while.
They could have been using it to get the tincture to make edibles. There's lots of things to do with that quantity.
You're right. And
even have
the interesting thing is edibles under the code is not viewed as marijuana. It's a totally different.
Well, this is why I think that I struggle with this, just as a lot of people do, in that I completely sympathize with the idea that God knows locking up especially young black men for weed is stupid and destructive and harmful to our communities to the thousandth power. But there is a part of me that worries that if we completely take weed out of the enforcement equation, will we begin to miss folks that are up to no good, but that we couldn't get on anything else at least right then? Like, I do credit Sergeant Boatwright saying, now I don't believe he's solving murders that they're solving murders over there with weed. But what I'm saying is, a lot of times if you run down 3 or 4 folks that have weed that, have masks in the car or something, or, they're up to no good, and the weed is the linchpin to at least put the pause button on what the hell they're doing. If we can't even do that anymore, then I do worry about what the public safety consequences are. I got a mother out here. I got a daughter out here. I don't think I'm, a right-wing reactionary to say I want to think and do this carefully. That's all.
It's interesting because from the police standpoint, I think their argument would be that, hey, this is one of the investigatory tools that we use to sit down and investigate crime. And you're taking a tool away from us. Under the consent decree, you've already taken other tools away from us. You want us to decrease the crime. Tools? I.e. the clearing the corners, i.e. going and chasing people. And under this consent decree, those are things you can no longer do. In a high crime area,
that's giving something to the community that should have never
been
I understand, happening in the first place.
I understand, but there's a case called Wardlow that says in a high crime area, if you make eye contact and an individual runs off, it's written by Chief Justice Rehnquist. I think it's the most racist opinion that's written, but it's the law. I gotta quote it because I gotta know it to beat it. So don't come for me in the law.
Don't say that. We took the consent decree took tools from the police.
But see, I'm telling you from their point of view. Their point of view is going to say we can't chase you anymore under Wardlow. Even though Wardlow's good law, we can't chase you under the consent decree. A number of things that they could do, they're trying to say they can't do, and now you take away the marijuana. They're going to sit down and say. And I'm telling you their argument. I'm not saying I agree with it, but their argument is going to be, well, how are we supposed to do our job in this day and age of changing crime? And what are some of your views about that?
I would say that the way this played out yesterday creates more of a gray area, which I understand where Sergeant Boatwright is coming from in that sense. As a police officer, you want clear rules. And paradoxically, this strong thing that Mosby laid down yesterday actually makes it a grayer area, because now an officer is pulled between the tension of what the state's attorney said they would like to happen and what they have to do every day when they're out there and there's a guy smoking weed or whatever. They're still being told to arrest these people by their interim commissioner, and that just creates more of a gray area. I think that's one of the biggest problems with it.
An interim commissioner that has 5 days left on the job.
It makes me think of D.C. It has a unique legalization framework. Initiative 71 was passed. So D.C. has 4 or 5 medical dispensaries at this point. That is not where most people get their weed in D.C. D.C. you can actually grow. You can actually grow up to 6 plants in your own house. So they have created this free-for-all. The way that this gray economy is, I report on this, or I have reported on this for Leafly, just sort of navigating the ins and outs. You buy a ticket to an event. You go to some club. You buy a T-shirt for say $50 might be the going price of an eighth at this event. You then get a free gift of an eighth. And this is actually the backbone of an underground economy there. There's whole issues there on why this is that have to do with congressional oversight of D.C.'s laws. They're not allowed to set up their own framework the way Colorado, Washington, California, etc. have. So I guess I found it to be relevant because it is an absolute gray area. Police, though, they preceded all this by saying we are going to stop. This was police who decided this, I believe, maybe at the direction of the mayor. But again, there was some synergy like we were talking about earlier. They said we're going to stop stopping people for weed. If it's on another exception, there would be if it's on federal property, they can still get jammed up and charged with all sorts of things, which is 1/3 of the land in D.C. But yeah, that is, again, it's a no man's land, and that's sort of what we are kind of doing here, creating a schism between law enforcement agencies here on what they can police and what they can't.
What's going on in D.C. reminds me of the movie Car Wash. Remember with George Carlin? He's like, I don't sell weed. I'll sell you this bong. The weed comes with the bong for free.
That's absolutely legal. That is totally legal in D.C.
Well, everyone, it's 6:30, and I think we've had a very good, entertaining show. I really enjoyed this. Catalina, thank you so much. You definitely have some very good views and insight. I always enjoy I always enjoy talking.
That's
with
why your ass ain't here.
the
Represent me when I whoop them, though. That's all I'm saying. You get them off like that, put it out there on the record. I said it. I said what I said. Ivan got me. Meet me on North Avenue, my man. You don't want it?
Thank you so much, Brandon, Ethan. A really great article. Go ahead and tell people where they can find your article and everything, so they can read it.
Let's give a shout out to the Baltimore Institute of Nonprofit Journalism, which hasn't been mentioned here. And
we co-funded the article, but it's on the BaltimoreFishBowl.com,
which is a local news website. Check us out. We have a newsletter. We'd welcome your readership.
So thank you so much.
Awesome.
This is Mark, Jason, myself.
Thank you, Bates. Good show yet again.
Well, thank you. You know, I just want to go ahead and put it out there for everybody, but this is an amazing show. Everybody be safe, stay warm, and free Keith Davis.